Choip, choip, choip. Choip, choip, choip.
It's quite a shame I don't get to see more of the bastard city other than this room. I mean, it's the capital. Not even a quest where I go into an area with a high crime rate. Take part in an alley dust-up. Welcome to the Tears, the last of the unconquered lands, not yet possessed by Overlord Kairos. And you're the Overlord's agent, and the Tears are your stage to display your skills and gain power via different avenues. And the three most obvious ones are become chummy with the disciplined, lineage-obsessed and xenophobic army of the disfavored. If that's not your bag, become friends with the chaotic mob, the Scarlet Chorus. Their hierarchy is only dependent on strength, and they'll take anyone who doesn't die. And yes, usually refusal is tantamount to death. Or lastly, rebel and try and take over the whole thing for yourself, facing off against Conqueror and Conqueror alike. You can also try helping those being conquered, but I just couldn't bear alienating anyone. Try to be friends with all the factions, and according to a few online sources, that made me lose out on the goody-goody path. Well, you can't please everyone. Least of all power-hungry factions, and I suppose this is to be expected in RPGs who use this kind of relationship system. And it's kind of noticeable just how easy it is to win some people to your side. I'm mostly talking about your companions. You can almost max out their loyalty simply by engaging in the optional discussions with them, pandering for the win, with little threat of offending your other companions. Because even though they have different moral codes, all of them agree that usually it's rude to eavesdrop. I mean, I maxed out Eb's loyalty and I almost never had her in my party. Just see how easily you impact her. Just remember to be careful with what you say, and you'll fairly easily gain the bonuses for advancing their loyalty or fear, for both people and factions, depending on your leadership style. The game actually is kind of unique, because unless you manage to make friends with the rebelling factions, and probably rebel yourself, most of your decisions will be focused on how you want to interpret and exert the Overlord's will. It's still kind of binary, but in an evil way. Do you enslave them or kill them outright? That kind of thing. Kind of results-orientated. And these choices are rather lovely in a strange way. Because usually in these types of games, I try and be the hero, or at the very least pick the choices that, in this context, would adhere to the game world's idea of heroism, in spite of my beliefs. I mean, it's a video game, there are only so many dialogue options. But in this game, the choices deviate substantially. Except maybe if you rebelled, but otherwise, you largely function within a framework set up by a dictator that rules with an iron fist. So unlike the other games where I try and be as goody-goody as possible, using the options supplied to me, here I actually base my decision on my moral beliefs. Or at the very least the closest it can possibly come to these decisions, employing logic, debate, and process of elimination to determine the least objectionable choice, the lesser of all those evils, maybe even culminating in you being uneasy or even unsatisfied at your choice. And arguably, moments when a game does that to you can be rather splendid. But the game is not a perfect example of that. If for no other reason than you don't really care about being the good guy at all. And you just want to revel in the evil, picking the worst possible decision every time. Plus you can't be too nice because that will earn you some wrath with certain factions or people. Or simply gain you no loyalty. And you may be a bit more reticent about missing out on the benefits the factions can give you. It's no fun being the hero when no one thinks you are. So you opt to just please them. I was on good terms with a lot of people, and that resulted in me not having to fight some tough battles. Or at least gave me the option to fight on my terms. So at some point the choices for me became less an RPG tool, and more a tool to ease my journey. And ultimately, it's easy to make friends. And it's kind of easy to fight the fights that are left. Thus, the game is kind of easy. I think I had maybe 2 truly difficult fights in the entirety of the game. But higher difficulties are available. And the combat is nice too, real-time fights. With a pause function you will probably use a lot. Classic CRPG, you have different skills to employ, use what you prefer, and what's appropriate for the situation. There are a lot of them to choose from, and you aren't really fixed in terms of progression. Except in the natural way where you divide focus and dilute power, miss out on some higher skill level stuff, But if you have a strategy you like, just go for it. The skills improve as you use them. Perhaps a more honest gauge of what skills your character uses. Because if they're important to your playstyle, you'll continue to use them and thus improve them anyway. But I suppose the large amount of skills you can choose from are undercut by the fact that a noticeable amount of them apply to different weapon types you can use. And also, it's easier to be a jack of multiple trades in this game. To be, for instance, a character that's good at fighting or good at magic, yet at the same time good at non-combat pursuits. Because usually they only depend on lore and subterfuge skills. I don't know why knowing the legends of the land make you better at persuasion, but in this game that's just how it works. And I played as a mage, so lore skill was already very important to me, as it directly impacted the power of my spells. And when it came to subterfuge, it wasn't one of my main skills. But when a character in the party with a higher subterfuge skill, say, picked a lock, the entire party gained experience in the skill. If it were that easy to be a thief, heist films would be dramas focusing on character development. By the end, it was quite easy to succeed in non-combat skill checks. And arguably, the skill system isn't really deep. Sure, it's less restrictive, but it takes away from the role-playing, I believe. But it's fun, less tearing your hair out because there was a skill you wanted to have, but you had to give it up. Plus, it does compensate by doing something amazingly. The magic system is brilliant. You learn different core effects, like fire or ice, as well as a bunch of different conveyance methods. A spell employing touch, a straight line cast, maybe an elemental ball. You mix and match to create the spell you want, as long as your lore skill can handle it. And lastly, you cap it off with an add-on that, say, increases its power, decreases its cooldown, or increases its range. Maybe give extra effects, etc. Even if you just use the system to max out the stats of your spells, make them stronger, extend their range, it's still cool. But when we start talking about the equipment side of things, it's kind of limited. It doesn't really scale up that much. I believe fairly early on you will see the strongest variants of standard equipment. But you can find and forge artifacts with powerful effects that you can make stronger by using them and building their reputation, which is awesome. You're making a piece of equipment legendary. Other than that, the equipment can be rather samey in a way, with very few tiers and not that much variety. You don't even use the inventory that much to go through the arduous task of comparing items. So it's not all bad, but back to the awesome. In keeping with isometric RPG tradition, you get a base, massive spires, that you can upgrade in different ways. And also just, keeps you above the populace. At this point, you start selling off your hoard of equipment, so that hopefully you will have enough money to forge a few artifacts. RPG economies, what are you gonna do? Visually, the game is nice, good full 3D, although the character portraits zoom in on the 3D models to display a level of detail that they really weren't designed for. Can make them feel a bit lifeless when you talk to someone, and the change in pose can be funny at times. Arguably here it would have been better to have no portrait than those portraits. And some maps can feel a bit cramped and compact in a bad way. But it looks pretty nonetheless. Even though for large portions of the game they show some ravaged, barren areas. Story-wise it's good, the dialogue is mature, decent, and really crass. It has some voiceover work as well. Odd voice acting choices, but good. The voices of Narat are kind of like a Joker figure.
So you found your backbone at last! Oh, we were worried past humiliations would make you soft, timid. That was a record for you, right? The baker's dozen lost in one sortie. If you had waited for the chorus reinforcements, maybe we'd have eyes and ears on the matter.
And the world building is quite good. It mostly revolves around the tiers and Kairos' law, and the Overlord's super weapon, Edicts. It can be intriguing. What is the nature of that magic, or the nature of Kairos themselves? Mysterious. The plot is also cool and unique in a way. There's no main antagonist, and no goal set early on in conventional terms. Kairos orders you to put an end to the rebellion. And as mentioned, to a large extent, your choices determine who you fight. Especially near the end, you can sometimes avoid boss battles. As long as you've earned their loyalty, it's actually quite neat. You weren't forced into fighting them. The developers made these fights, yet gave the possibility to dodge them. That is admirable, but it's also anticlimactic. There's no big boss. But I guess there can be quite a few biggish bosses if you're the more abrasive sort and don't like making friends. And maybe the Path of Chaos where you go up against all the factions, or the Path of Rebellion will feel a bit better if you like a bit more action. It took me about 55 hours to complete the game, but I did restart, replayed the Conquest, made a few different choices, so maybe subtract 4 hours. Plus I did save and load a lot. The game is cheap on Steam, 175 Rand full price, 43 Rand 75 on sale. That's 80 cents per hour of gameplay, 86 cents per hour if you don't count the 4 hours, but I usually include them in game time, a nice test run. Either way though, the value for money is brilliant. But to download it is quite big, as it takes up 13.4 gigabytes on the hard drive. It does barely work on the Warhorse. It's laggy, and I tested it on one of the Spires, not exactly a hotbed of activity. And the resolution and settings can't really be lowered that much from the settings of my original test, so that didn't really help. It even took quite a long time to load, so you're going to need something stronger than the Warhorse to play it. And stereotypically, it isn't kid-friendly, it's crass, sweary, quite grim, full of what we would call war crimes. The game is visually nice, can feel cramped at times, and the character portraits show far more detail than the models were designed for. Plus the portrait posing can be a bit silly, but otherwise nice isometric 3D graphics, even though they show mostly barren, dusty areas. The game has a fun, if not deep, skill system. The combat is good and the spellcraft is great. Unfortunately, I felt that your active, usable skills were a bit cluttered, with added unique skills and powerful teamwork skills that aren't attached to your stats, but rather companion loyalty. The game has good, unique story and plot. Good dialogue and world building too. Kairos is mysterious, and what's your part in all of this? But it can feel a bit anticlimactic. Maybe even rushed at the end. You're not working towards a big bad boss. The game has a lot of choices and paths to follow, and being stuck on the evil track can be surprisingly pleasant. You're like a stuck bureaucrat who kills, and that can encourage more moral contemplation regarding your choices, but it can also encourage using choices as a means to an end. But in all fairness, a lot of RPGs do this. On the maybe side, the reputation system and the choices related to favor are easy to manipulate. You can gain a whole lot of favor through optional dialogue, and during these there's very little reason to fear offending your other companions. But the choices don't just affect the dialogue, they can actually impact who you fight, making even big fights avoidable. As said, that can be anticlimactic, but you have to admit, that's impressive. On the con side, the game isn't challenging, but there are higher difficulty modes. And also the equipment doesn't really scale up. It doesn't have equipment variety in a meaningful way. It's mostly aesthetic, and the in-game economy adheres to RPG tradition, in that it's underwhelming. But the artifact system is cool. Forging a legend for the item. Come on, play it. The game's currency is rings. Play it and be disappointed that they didn't find some way of incorporating Sonic. Well, actually, in all fairness, Barrack is spiky.
Choip, choip, choip. Choip, choip, choip.